All right, well, Mr. Farnsley comes in just in the nick of time because it is 5 PM and this is a special meeting of the City of Prospect City Council, which I called for the purpose of considering a second reading of two ordinances, being 609-2021 and 610-2021. So without any further delay, we'll move into the first ordinance, which is 609-2021, which is an ordinance establishing a budget for the general fund of the City of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021, and ending June 30th, 2022. It's hard to say. Do I hear a motion to adopt that ordinance?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
Yes. Can I be recognized, Mayor?
Certainly.
Okay. Please excuse me, I have a statement. I'll try to make it as brief as I can. To my knowledge, this budget for fiscal year 21-22 is our largest budget ever in our nearly 50-year history. It has numerous expense elements for projects. It also includes costs that will set the stage for ongoing expenses in the future. First, I want to say that I'm very glad that the budget includes what many have said is a Cadillac health insurance coverage plan, and that this plan will provide excellent health care for all of the city employees and their eligible dependents. And of course, this includes our fine police department. Second, it's very good that this budget also supports another salary increase. Our employees are our most important asset, so this is important as well. Thirdly, we have some monies left over, and I just heard a minute ago that it's more than we even thought that is left over from the current budget. So all of this is good. However, I do have concerns, and I think it's important to recognize that the city should strive to have sufficient reserves. And this is just my philosophy. I'm not saying it needs to be the city philosophy, but going back, I always felt that 9 months of reserves was a conservative estimate, and I think it applies to a city as well. We do not have that much set aside for expenses and rainy days. We maybe have half of that. So with that in mind, Mayor and fellow council and staff, I'd like to ask and suggest that, John, should this pass today, that going forward, when you make your mayor update report at each council meeting, I know that the current city clerk has done a really great job in making sure that we stay on top of our expenses and monitoring that. And I know you have too, Mayor, but we're really going to need you to watch this day in and day out. And I'm going to expect and ask for at each city council meeting a report on the finances for the projects as well as overall for the city. And I think that in doing that, it would be a good project for yourself to stay proactively engaged, but also keep the council better informed as to what's going on. And finally, it would give the citizens of Prospect a good idea of where we are financially at each council meeting. Thank you.
May I respond?
Sure.
I'll be glad to do everything that you just asked. However, I do want to point out that every month through our bookkeeper, we provide every member of the council with precise figures of what has been spent on each item, where we are in the budget. I don't know what more information I can provide you, but I will provide you with everything I can.
Thank you, John.
Is there any other discussion?
Hello, John. This is Frank. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have several points I'd just like to bring up. Number one, there's no baseline for the salaries, with the exception of the police. Yet we are giving 3 raises within a year, and I'm concerned about that. I'm also uncomfortable with the depletion of our reserves. This budget contains $220,000 for the park, the Honey Creek Park playground, walkway, et cetera. And I think that's pretty much a bait and switch on the residents. And I also have been advocating for a line item budget for expenses for the council for items that are specifically dealing with separation of powers. And I think it's necessary that those be in there. So without those things, I can't support this budget.
Any other discussion?
Yes. I'm not sure that I totally agree with either one of the people who have just spoken, but I too have a very real problem with the reserves. If we look at the amount of money that is coming out of the reserves to sustain some of the things in this budget, that amount of money is more than 2/3 of the amount of the reserves that were uncommitted that just came in the audit that we just looked at, which granted is a year old. And I do think that the reserves will increase this year. But we don't know the amount of that increase until this year's audit is done. And if some of these items that would be coming out of this amount of money that is authorized to come out of the reserves, if that makes sense, it could be done at a future budget amendment. I can't vote for something now that talks about anticipatory reserves for funding some of the items that are in this budget.
All right.
Mayor, may I be recognized?
I was told today that our surplus for the current fiscal year will be in the neighborhood of $680,000. So I just wanted to put that out on the table. Doug, did you want to speak?
Yeah, so another way of looking at that is we're on the eve of increasing our reserves by over $600,000 on what was a balanced budget. We didn't budget $600,000 coming in under budget $600,000 plus. So I think the reserves are more than adequate, and I think the mayor has been good stewards of the city's money. I think we've got a good budget with reasonable increases in salaries for our employees and our police. So I think we're right on track.
Other discussion?
I did want to mention, that's okay. I have some concerns, but it's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, which are that we do need a set of reserves and there is money set aside for a pension. But my concern is the amount we have of all of that at the lack of investment in upkeep and maintenance and infrastructure and projects just to maintain our city or appreciate our employees or retain good quality people to continue to work. So my concern, so just from the audit, it was somewhere short of 900K, between 8 and 900K is what we have in uncommitted money just sitting there. Add that to the 680K that we're finishing under budget. We're just about $1.5 million that we've collected in your tax money that we don't have it earmarked to invest in something. But we also have $2.1 million set aside for pension reserves. And I would like that to come up in discussion at a future meeting as to whether we really need to have that kind of money, 2.1, set aside for a pension. Because I think realistically, if we all go with heart of hearts, no one is going to come demand that in one day, period. Not in any political climate, period. Now, I do think it's great that we remember that that is due at some point, and we are continuing to pay on that every year over $100,000 in this year's that we're paying to stay up with that. So it's not like we're not paying into the pension. We are paying a lot into the pension, and we should have some of that set aside and plan for that. But we have a 2.1 million plan, and in between this, $1.5 million now in money that basically wasn't spent on a project, that was extra revenue, et cetera. So my concern is I do think, I think maybe 6 months of, personally 6 months of reserves is what we would need, but I would like in a future meeting to have a discussion about, hey, do we really need a reserves on reserves if we have 2.1 million set aside for a pension obligation that is not going to come bite us at any point? We are probably, if we go city to city, probably the only city that is holding a fully funded future payment of a pension. I mean, I would love to hear any city that's doing it 100%. We are so fortunate to have that kind of money. I just think to have a whole nother 1.5 million on top of it, to me, it feels egregious just from it's taxpayer money, and I want to see it put into things. I want to see it into roads and street signs, and we can all disagree on all the extra stuff, but paving roads, street signs, lights, all of these things, this money we can't keep, I would use the word hoard, but we can't keep doing that. And that's just my thought. So I would love a future discussion at some point if we can decide how much money do we want in reserves. It's eating away at me as we continue to talk, since I've been doing this since just November, brand new, but I've spent hours and hours looking through these books and sitting with people. And we need more reserves. The non-concrete number, I think we need to I would love to have an open discussion and hear what everybody's thoughts are. That's not one for today, but I just want to make sure everybody knows we have 2.1 million plus 1.5 million, and a lot of things from our discussion of the budget, we may come under budget in this upcoming year, and there's more surplus. So that's my concern is making sure we keep up with the city, is my take.
Actually, I agree with you. I think that we have not kept ahead of keeping an eye on our infrastructure. And I agree with you that we need to do that, and it needs to be done by professionals and not by seat of the pants looking at things. I totally agree with that. Going back to another thing you said, and I'll say 6 months reserves instead of 9, but 6 months reserves is $2.1 million. So I agree with you that a discussion of, it's not just do we fund pension or not, it's what do we think an appropriate amount of reserves really are.
100%. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
John, can I be recognized once more?
Yes, sir.
That has kindled a thought in me. I do agree with that. I like that we are concentrating on infrastructure. One of the suggestions that was made by one of my fellow council members was to take a bit of time and let's wait maybe till spring of next year before we decide on a lot of these projects that are in this budget. And I was all over that idea, and I still think it's a good idea. So I just want to say that before we vote tonight, have to vote on what I think right now. And that is going to change in the future, but we don't know what that future is until we get there. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next year. And there are opportunities that will afford themselves in April of 2022, or somewhere around there, from the US 42 safety study. Some of which we may really want to jump on. So, but anyway, I just wanted to say that just making a decision tonight based upon what I know right now, and I echo what Sandra said about my concerns of the reserves.
Well, but going where you are, depending on how that study comes out, there may be projects
Yes.
that we want to fund that are infrastructure projects. And if we committed all the money, then we don't have that. I hear you.
All right, anyone else?
But just so I'm clear, and so the citizens are clear, we've got $3.6 million in reserves. So I don't think any reasonable person would think that we don't have adequate reserves. That's just my view. So I think we've got a responsible budget, good projects in it. there are probably other needs that we're not meeting, but I think we're on track.
Any further discussion?
We've got $3.6 million in reserves. By ordinance, we need to keep 2 million, 2.1 million, which is about 6 months. It's about 6 months. Last year, the auditors told us there's no compelling need to keep that much money. We're doing well with our pension. It's like a mortgage. We're paying the mortgage every year, and no one's going to close and ask us for $2.1 million. So we're in good shape there. And we're going to take out, what, $500,000 out of the reserves to fund this project, but we'll put more money in. I think the reserves are in good shape.
Anyone else? If that's all the discussion, then I'll ask for a vote. And I'll start with Mr. Hulsman.
No,
Ms. Adele,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard,
No,
Mr. Farnsley,
Yes,
Mr. Fulcher,
No,
3-3. I vote yes. So it passes 4-3. Next item on the agenda is ordinance 610, 2021, an ordinance enacting and adopting the 2020 supplement to the Code of Ordinances for the City of Prospect. Do I have a motion?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote. Mrs. Leonard,
yes,
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Ms. Adele,
Yes.
Mr. Hulsman,
Yes.
Mr. Fulcher,
yes.
Mr. Farnsley,
yes.
unanimously passed. That concludes the business of this meeting. I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Meeting is adjourned.